Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Lowdown. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the Director of High Performance at Orlando, Mr. David Cosgrave. Dave, big warm welcome back to the show.
Connor, it's great to have my second visit to the Lowdown.
Second visit and first time to Miami.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks. I'm at Soccer X with you now, having a great time.
Yeah.
But thanks for the opportunity to get back on the Lowdown.
No, anytime. I think there's a lot of demand to get you back on, especially I believe it was just at the start of your stint in Orlando of March 2022 last year, if I don't recall. But anyways, I'll tell you one thing, I was walking along that waterfront this morning. It reminded me much like Salthill at home.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time in Galway growing up, so it's pretty windy here. It's the sunshine state, but it's not so sunny today.
So tell us, how have you found the last few days here at Soccer X?
It's so interesting here with all these industry experts at Soccer X. The Messi effect is in full effect, maybe too much effect. It's on everybody's lips and everybody's talking about it, so it's quite interesting. But it seems that Miami is the global destination now, and US soccer is going to be the place to be for the next couple of years, and then even up to LA games. There's going to be big hype around everything in the United States for the next few years, so it seems like this is the place to be right now.
And has there been any speeches thus far that have whet the appetite?
I was interested in talking to Don Garber and one of the executives from Apple, just talking about how they're innovating all the time with their 360 program. So that was really interesting. And then yesterday, listening to Tom Bogart talking about how he gets his scoops from all the transfer news. That was very interesting as well. So I enjoyed that.
Tom is another requested guest actually here in the Lowdown, so I'll have to make the connect with him soon. And maybe now Miami's the right time to get him on, Dave. Who knows? But anyways, we record here during the international break, middle of Soccer X, of course, right in the interlude of the MLS playoffs. What a season it's been for you guys up there in Orlando. Yeah,
we're the team nobody wants to play right now. We're the road warriors.
What's that Spanish phrase that you guys had?
Find a way.
Find a way.
Yeah, find a way. And it's from our coach, Oscar Pereira. I think he's got probably 500 games in the MLS, or coming up to 500 games. Played 250 himself.
Absolutely crazy.
And he had a great period in Dallas where they nearly won everything. And he said to his teams, "Busca la forma. We have to find a way." So it's part of his principles and his identity. It's really interesting to see how it works. And that's been it's been refreshing watching how teams try and problem solve, because it's difficult to play in Florida. The climate, it's like you suffer. So when you're out there and you're basically trying to find a way, you're battling yourself, you're battling the climate, you're battling the humidity. You're also battling really good teams. There's some really good teams that visit us here on the east. So watching him work has been a real eye-opener for me.
I think that's an interesting one too, Pereira, the leader, because we were at the last regular game of the season, Yanni and myself, TFC versus Orlando, and the cold Toronto winter air is beginning to settle into BMO Stadium that night, but you could feel the warmth from the Orlando players and the warmth of Oscar Pereira indeed, just little touch points during the game. Obviously a game landmarked by Maguire's Galazzo, but there seems to be this unstoppable, unshakable momentum that you guys have at the moment.
Yeah, there's something crazy about the momentum we have, and the word we use to describe it is consistency. So focusing on little details, focusing on showing up, and consistency is really the boring word for motivation. Are you motivated? And the playing group from 1 to 11, from 11 to 16, and from 16 all the way to the end of the roster, they're all so committed to Oscar and the coaches, but they're committed to each other. It's the team dynamics within the dressing room. I've never seen anything like it. So there is a chance, that they're so committed and they actually like each other so much that they could do something special. Because it's hard. It's hard to win the MLS, and it's hard to win the East. We're the second team in the East, and we have home field advantage. And when we go on the road, it seems nobody can beat us. So we have 10 road wins this year, which is huge. I think it's 1.85 points per game. And we were just scalping everybody on the road. It became road warriors. So there's something special in the dressing room that you can bottle. And Oscar has it, and his coaches have it, and the players, they're so committed to him. And they do everything with consistency. I know it's boring, but they're consistent. It's little details. So it's been great to watch over the last 2 years this group become, consistent in everything they do.
Yeah, because like it's really the basics of which you lay the foundation to achieve buy-in as well, and it's not only obviously due to Oscar, due to the players. Like there's a whole cast of supporting staff, including yourself. But what I'm curious to learn is obviously it's been a while since we spoke, March 2022. In fact, August 2022, I was kindly invited to spend a few wonderful days, and I have to say, at Orlando, meeting the likes of Caleb, yourself, Ricardo Moreira, the TD down there, fantastic guy, Ricardo. But obviously since then, I mean, it's been landmarked by an MLS Open Cup drive, the season on the road, 10 away wins, and the playoffs. Now, what have been some key landmarks for you as a staff in the background?
Yeah, so the big moments are believing in something. So last year we won the US Open Cup. That's the FA Cup to everybody over in Europe. So we won that, and all of a sudden the group believed, that they're worthy champions. They did it at home in our stadium, so the community started to believe. So the group believed. Now, Oscar and his coaches have won many times before. Some of the guys in the dressing room had won times before. Not everybody had won before. So, all the big managers in Europe, they love to get the first trophy. Mourinho loves to get the first trophy because then the club believes. So that happened back in September. And then, the coaches, they get a few new players and they have to mold them early. That's difficult. So we get over a few like bumps in the road in the early part of the year. He gets to pick the same team consistently. Our availability is at 97%.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's crazy.
That's nuts. So unprecedented. For the travel you're doing as well.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of traveling. Like it's 40,000 miles you travel. 97% availability for the year. The staff are doing an unbelievable job. The nutritionist, the chef, the strength and conditioning guys. Everybody's doing this amazing job. So everybody's available. So Oscar gets to play the same team that he wants in the second half of the season. So somewhere in June or July, everything just clicks. Everything. And then Duncan Maguire starts banging in loads of goals. Don't know if you've seen his goal in Toronto where he retires Michael Bradley, literally retires him. He's a rookie. He scored maybe 14 goals this season. So a rookie scoring 14 goals, that just clicks. Our goalkeeper and the guys in front of him, I think 11 or 12 clean sheets. Our fullbacks are getting high up the pitch. Everything clicks. Progressing the ball through the phases. And everybody's contributing with goals. Facundo Torres, our star man, he has a baby, but he still shows up. Our centre back has a baby, still shows up. All these new things happening, but everything clicks. And right now, we're in the semi-finals. Anything can happen. We have Columbus next. So when everybody's watching this, we've either, got a bloody eye from Columbus, or we've managed to, get past Columbus, who are an amazing attacking team. So if that happens, we could be in a conference final after last year winning an FA Cup, US Open Cup.
Well, what I'm most curious to know more about is, as an outsider obviously looking in and being involved in the North American climate now, at its best, North American soccer for me, this blue sky vision, it's a can-do, a will-do mentality. At its worst, at its very, very worst, can be quite transient, quite transactional, quite fleeting, to be honest. But even from the visit I spent with you, those few wonderful days in Orlando, to just even hear how eloquently you speak about the staff and the players together as one community, that stuff doesn't happen by chance.
No, it doesn't happen. So it's a cohesive model, right? People say, what does that mean, socially cohesive? Everything is about the group, right? So they do this famous barbecue, right, where everybody goes and has barbecue together. But one player pays for it, and all the coaches cook it. So the coaches are at service for the players, but for all the staff. So 100 people will rock up, and the coaches, in particular one Josema, the assistant, he will spend the morning cooking, and then everybody sits down, everybody rocks up, everybody breaks bread together, and it's all about the group, it's all about each other, it's all about breaking bread together. That is intentional, the social cohesiveness. One of the things about social cohesion is that there's always a guy who's a loafer, social loafer. He's a passenger on the culture bus. That guy has to show up for socially cohesive things. He has to be there in the group, and we don't have any of these guys that sit at the back of the bus. So our dressing room is so strong. There's no alienated guy, there's no guy who's passive, there's no maverick, or there's no I used to call them terrorists, but that's the person who sits at the back of the bus who doesn't get involved in the culture. So in a socially cohesive model where everybody tries to get on with each other, of course there's problems sometimes, but if it's related to tasks, you can usually fix it. But when everybody has to get on, because that's the power of the group, it's amazing to watch. But it's all intentional. The head coach and his coaching staff decide that this is how they run the group, and the group reward it with strong bonds. It's a very, very strong dressing room.
But I would say that too. Like, there's so many touch points informally, on a day-to-day basis. There, the training ground design, it's actually works in your favour in terms of how intimate it really is.
Yeah. Touch points from all the staff are very important. From the morning, our nutritionist who's provides service excellence. Our performance chef, all the culture starts with a warm welcome. Our ATC, which is a physio, he gets around everybody in the morning to check in with them. Our Spanish speaking trainers, who are so important, they do a lot of influence and persuasion work,
Right.
building relationships, informal chit chats, making sure that everybody's aligned before we go out onto the pitch. So the quality of the relationships is so strong even before we go on the grass, just to check if you're okay, I'm okay. If I know you, you know me, we trust each other, we can talk about the difficult things and have micro conflicts. It's better to have mini micro conflicts about some process than it is to let things build up. So everybody is going around in the morning making sure all those touch points are done, all the staff. It's really, really rewarding, because then when we get on the grass, the coaches are in charge, it's their stage, and the staff all step back.
It was interesting, in fact, when I was down there, not to undervalue your own self, but speaking to other fellow staff members of yours down there about yourself, they in fact came back to me as you being the key cultural architect down there, Dave. And for me and you, obviously, we speak about culture. We speak about it quite profoundly. It's a role close to my heart. It's one which I imbue currently at FC London up in Canada. So, I've sought guidance from yourself countless times, unbeknownst to yourself or beknownst to yourself. So, you as being this key cultural architect, speaking to you about it before, you liken culture to that of an iceberg. That's the metaphor you use. Could you elaborate a bit more for the audience?
Yeah, so culture as an iceberg is an interesting thing. Pippa Grange, who worked with England and Right to Dream, she taught me a lot of things about culture. And if you imagine culture as a competitive advantage, right? Everybody has got slogans on the wall, and everybody has got their vision and mission stuff. So everybody can see that as the iceberg above the water. But the real culture happens beneath the waterline. All the things that are not said, all the things that have been endured, all the things like ghosts in the walls. You can probably think of famous clubs that seem to always have problems. They might have ghosts in the walls. So all of that culture happens beneath the waterline. And what you want to do with good culture work is you want to get the iceberg above the waterline so it becomes visible. So culture as a competitive advantage is you want to clean up the past. You want to find out what's under the waterline. You want to find out what the people say to each other when there's, a water cooler moment, or what do people think about on a Sunday night before they go to work on a Monday. That's culture. That's the bit underneath the waterline, and that's the bit that you need to understand when you're a cultural architect, because you're walking around the floor, you're trying to figure out what's happening, trying to figure out if people are getting on with each other, and if you don't know what's under the water, then you have a problem. So there's a great exercise called the stinky fish, right? If you can imagine a stinky fish, right? Basically, you can smell it, and that can be bad culture. So how do you find out what the stinky fish is? And it's an exercise. You get everybody to sit down and you say, hey, look, what are the things that you're uncertain about? What are the things that worry you the most? What are the things that you don't tell people about this place? What are the things that make you anxious right now about this place? Now, if you can get everybody to write those things down, the stinky fish, right? Now you basically can find out what's beneath the waterline in a business. And then, it can be about rewards or recognition. It can be about performance or progression. It can be about your character and how you fit in a team. It can be that maybe you're sitting in the wrong seat on the bus and you want to go somewhere else. Right? Maybe you need to leave with love. Maybe you need to leave the business or leave the club. That's culture work, trying to understand what goes on beneath the waterline. So the key here is try and get the iceberg above the waterline so it's all visible.
And that's an interesting one. To touch upon the stinky fish analogy, how have you utilised that in the past season to any competitive advantage of your own at Orlando?
Well, it's so we're all on the same page right now that we don't even have to think about it, right? But when I first came over 2 years ago, I spent a lot of time just walking around, just getting to know people, because leadership has to be visible. Right, you have to be walking the floor, getting to know people. Little micro coaching sessions, warm handshakes, understanding what the standards are in your business, making sure that you are accountable as a leader. So I'm a follower. I follow my boss, who's Luis Musi, who's the GM. and I follow Oscar. So I'm a true follower before I'm a leader. So I made sure I was always walking around, getting to know everybody. And then as you walk around, the quality of the relationships get better, you know. People want to talk to you, they want to open up, they want to tell you what they'd like to do. And we went from a lot of generalists to specialists, so everybody changed seats. People sat on the right part of the bus for them. We focused on their competencies. We made sure that they were capable in their core role. We made sure everybody was speaking a common language, which was the language of high performance, but Spanish, Latin context, with a few Americans thrown in, and some guy from Europe. So I was the outsider. So instead of being, you know, the guy that on the same side as everybody, I was the guy who was the outsider. So we all had to learn how to speak the same common language. Then we figured out, do we all have character that can sustain this really long season? It's 11 months long. You know, it's a really long season because the League Cup. So can we now, you know, get through the season together in the trenches and be in competition mode for, you know, a long period of time? That's very hard in high performance.
It's interesting too, right? Because we mistake culture, right, as this thing that's either black or white, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily top down, bottom up, but it's an emergent of things. It's living. It's like a verb. It's something that's tangible, as you spoke about. You know, I'm delighted here. There's a Latin American influence. There's a European influence. There's even a heckin' Irish influence there. So use what you have, and it's something that emanates. It's living. It's breathing.
Yeah. Culture is the outcome, and then we have all beneath the waterline. But Pippa Grange again, she taught me so much about culture. She did so much work with England getting to the 2018, I think, World Cup. And she followed on from Dan Ashworth and What It Takes to Win and Dave Redden, and I've used all of those things to help build, you know, a culture framework. And there's so many parts to culture. There's the story we tell ourselves. There's the quality of our relationships, how we communicate with each other, but also world-class standards, you know, accountability, you know, showing up, how we admonish bad behavior, because what you resist and what you reward as culture is what you become. That's really important, because if you resist something, that becomes a subculture. It's not a wrong culture, but it's a subculture. And it's usually because that resistant group, they're not following a part of where the rest of the club is going. So it's important to understand that. Now, do you challenge it? Do you try and understand it? How do you bring it closer to the group? You know, that's part of culture. That's culture work. So you have all these things, clarity of vision. Do we all know why we're there? And one thing that was really interesting, the power dynamics of a group. In Bolton, sports science, where I came from, sports science became really powerful, so powerful. One later manager decided to dismantle it because he knew it was too powerful. So Bolton became the sports science hub. And like lots of careers came out of Bolton, but it became too powerful for the next generations. So they dismantled it. So that's culture as well. So, you know, should sports science run your culture, or should it be a socially cohesive culture, or should it be like maybe Toto Wolff, win at all costs? Well, I'm sure it's not win at all costs, but win at cost. So yeah, that's all part of the, you know, the culture framework that we've developed.
It's quite interesting, and as you speak about there, I mean, utilising what you have, and also the importance of having a framework, but the importance too of utilising past experiences, and you've no shortage of those. You spoke about Bolton, your time, of course, at Liverpool, Tottenham, Copenhagen, even Right to Dream, that we've all been speaking about. But I mean, just for people in the audience listening to this, you know, it's pretty incredible. We were at Soccer X yesterday, and me and you were just speaking about the Copenhagen Man United game last week, Wednesday, Dave, and I was just saying, this is absolutely bloody incredible. I've never seen a Scandinavian fan base this ardent and passionate and fervent in a crowd. But again, to re-jog my memory, he says this all started with one guy.
Yeah, like some amazing things have happened in Copenhagen, and I'm not too sure they get enough credit for what's really happened there. Now, when Ståle Solbakken came back after Wolverhampton, himself and Johan Lange set about, you know, rebuilding FC Copenhagen into this thing. I went there in 2014 to maybe 2019-20. We had 6 European campaigns, 6 titles, but they set 2 strategies from 2014 and 2019 off. One part of that was to fill the stadium, right? Another part of it was to make Copenhagen a destination in global football. Another part was to build FCK talent, all these unbelievable young players coming out of FC Copenhagen who are playing in the Champions League. I don't think they get enough credit for that. But one part of it was to get the fans in the stadium and it's raucous now. And it started with like a fan liaison officer, and he managed to get everybody, you know, into this crazy section. It's called Section 12. But now it's the destination thing to do in Copenhagen if you're aged between, you know, 16 and 25. It's wild. They have this ticket subscription that's gone through the roof. And Mikkel Bjerre, who does the tickets, and the new CEO, like FC Copenhagen are just breaking records everywhere. And you should definitely have a little look inside that wild Section 12 and the tifos they have. Incredible. And when they welcome teams there, it looks a little bit like you know, Welcome to Hell in Galatasaray. But it's an amazing achievement by everybody at FC Copenhagen. I'm so proud of the time I spent there, but what they're doing is just mind-blowing.
But for people listening, aspiring leaders, Dave, how important is it for them to understand that? In fact, you speak about strategies enacted in 2014, 2019. And the club rightly is only getting the credit it deserves now, but in fact you were part of that at the time, planting seeds to trees which obviously weren't able to see during your tenure.
Someone has to bring strategy to life, right? It's no good on paper. That's a classic line that everybody uses. And culture eats strategy for breakfast. Those things that people put on the wall. But there's something about FC Copenhagen that's really interesting. The club expects, the city expects, the staff expect. So we talk about ghosts in the wall, but the wall expects, right? So when you're there, you have to raise your level because everybody in the club expects. And there is pressure there. But one guy, Robert Scove, who scored, I think, 25 goals one year, he said to me, pressure is a privilege. And being here as a young player, he came from Silkeborg, he said, the pressure here is a privilege. And that's a way you should look at the pressure. You know, that raises the standards higher. So everybody who goes to work in Copenhagen or everybody who plays there, they automatically know that they have to raise at a level. And that's what we've kind of also done in Orlando. Nani came over and he raised the level, okay? Mauricio Pereira, our captain, came back from Krasnodar and he raised the level. And now young players know they have to meet a level. So like I came from Europe to Orlando, and straight away my standards would be different because I've seen it in some big dressing rooms in England and some big dressing rooms in Denmark. So, you know, having those people walking around the business, so important. Our business CEO who runs the business, he came from Tampa Bay Lightning. He won a few Stanley Cups, he had a few rings. He knows the level. Our owners are from the NFL, Minnesota Vikings. They know the level. Luis and Ricardo are two leaders. You know, Ricardo was at Columbus. He knows the level. Luis was at Dallas. He won with Oscar. He knows the level. So having all those kind of, it's called a brain trust. Having all these experts around who know the level means that everybody has to meet the level. And if you can't meet it, you don't make it.
It's interesting though to play devil's advocate, having a brain trust like that. Looks good on paper. Can be quite difficult in practice to get everyone aligned and on the same page. What's your role in greasing the wheels on that?
Well, so I'd say my role really is, you know, to look after my verticals, to look after my pillars. You know, if I'm the high performance guy and the medical guy, well, you know, the simple thing is we have to get our tasks right. If we don't get an injury diagnosis nailed on from the start, well, you know, it's going to deviate at the end. So my job is to get the granular details right, and then make sure that all the staff, they lead it. So they have full autonomy. I make sure that they feel competent, and I make sure that there's harmony amongst the groups. It's a very simple model, right? Do you feel like you can make this decision yourself? So I mentor them, they make it themselves. Are they competent? So do I get an expert to mentor them? So we have a sprint mentor, we have a rehab mentor, we have a psychology mentor. So all the young staff get mentored by global experts, and then I just make sure it's harmonious, right? So that means that you can have a little bit of a disagreement about S&C, for instance. The pillars of S&C, is it more science or art? Okay. So one guy might go, look, it's very scientific, we're going to do this. And another guy, no, it's about this, it's about the art of how we do S&C. So what we do is we then navigate, you know, where do we sit on that continuum for harmony? So everybody can feel like they're included, put their hand up, you know, it's psychological safety. So they feel like they're included. It's safe to, you know, challenge. And, you know, bad behavior is not rewarded under this model. So if you basically don't like science or you don't like art and you have a hissy fit, well, you know, that's not going to work in the group, because the group wants to find some resolution, and they're happy to have micro conflicts. It's really interesting. Everybody's happy to have a little bit of micro conflict.
Crazy. And I suppose, like, you don't want to be in an environment, as you alluded to there earlier on, where you can't have the conversation about the stinky fish.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's a fine line between having micro conflict and enough to burn you.
Yeah, you have to get what's left, what's not said. You have to get it said. Somehow you have to get those words out. That comes with trust. So as a leader, if I look after you and I'm credible with my words and I'm authentic, I'm a bit vulnerable myself, I'm willing to make some mistakes, and I put my hand up. When we have to make huge calls about big hamstring injuries, we're doing rehab, you're on week 8 to 10, and yet someone has to put their hand up. I basically sit in big meetings and I say to the manager and the sports director and the head physios, this is my call, I'm accountable, I could be wrong, but this is why I was brought here. So everybody is like, oh, this guy is willing to make a mistake here, so this guy must be vulnerable. I don't know all the answers, but I'm willing, to take the fall if it doesn't work out. Now, thankfully, it's not worked. Thankfully, it's never happened.
It's worked pretty well so far.
Yeah, so we've had 0 re-injuries. Right, the rehab it's really good. Matt Taberner controlled the chaos. He's guided me, and now he's guiding the staff. He's great. So we've managed to make 100% return to play, no re-injuries. That's great. But ultimately, someone has to be accountable, and that's me. So that level of vulnerability, I hope, helps people when I say I want you to be autonomous, and I'm going to be a guy who's going to back you on every decision you make. I'm going to support you on it, and let's do it for the best of the club, not for yourself. We often worry as medics, we often worry about that someone's going to chastise us for getting an injury wrong, but in our culture that doesn't happen. Nobody's ever been hung out to dry. So that's really, really good. That's really good.
And speaking of leading by example, in fact, leveraging culture as a competitive advantage, there's been very few organisations such as the esteemed Right to Dream model in the past few years that have done that in spades. But what I'm curious about is to learn more about your own involvement with them, because stemming from someone that's been involved in high performance, Premier League, European football, what was it by moving to Right to Dream and doing some work with them at the time? What gaps were you looking to fill?
Like Right to Dream is the most unbelievable organisation, purposeful organisation, and the way they're expanding their footprint around the world, it's amazing to watch, and the work that Tom Vernon is doing and his group around him is amazing. But also the guys in Ghana, Eddie and Mishu, who's sitting in Egypt, the work they're doing, and then the functions around them, the business functions that support everything they do. And everybody knows about FC Nordsjælland and what they're doing with the academy there. But all those people, what they're doing is just something that's probably not been done at this scale before, coming as an academy. Man City have done it really well. The City Group have done it really well. At scale. But I was so interested after FC Copenhagen, to go and just listen to Tom Vernon about his vision and what he was doing, and to meet Pippa Grange and how she was going to support the build out. Wow. And I got to immerse myself in their organization for over 6 months. They let me look under the bonnet, and it was amazing what I saw, and it was a pleasure to work with them. And we built an amazing report together called the Purpose Report, which kind of underpins some of their employee support about how do you thrive at work, how do you get better at your craft, coaching or whatever you're doing, how do you know yourself better, know self, how do you know your teammate better, and how do you get better for the greater good of society through football. So it's a purposeful organization that plays football. It's rocking the boat, it's looking for excellence. It can be found anywhere. As you know, they're going to San Diego, and they're going to try and exploit the inefficiencies of the American pay-to-play system and find local talent in San Diego and local talent in over the border, which will be not a first. I'm sure El Paso have tried it and Austin have tried it, but they're going to try and really make San Diego a destination for soccer, and the Right to Dream model. I think we know it works now, so I'm very excited to see it.
And zooming out, obviously, not just incubated, and Tom is on record as saying this too, he just doesn't want the legacy and impact to be local to San Diego. I mean, zooming out and having worked with the organisation, do you think the Right to Dream model and affiliation with San Diego has the potential to revamp American soccer over the coming decade or so?
Well, I think American soccer is going to grow exponentially anyway. And yesterday, Don Garber talked about every 8 to 16-year-old now is playing soccer. Every boy and girl. So in 10 years and 20 years, this is going to be a huge market for them. But what Right to Dream are going to do is they're just going to show that, you know, young players, you know, can come into this system and play meaningful minutes early, maybe before they're 20, playing 1,000 minutes. You know, you become a performance player. I think this might be the first time that the MLS will have, like, maybe, you know, a really dominant under 21 player with maybe the sprinkle of a DP, because over in FC Northland they're playing without a DP. Yeah? So, you know, I'm sure they're going to be able to do it in the MLS. So just like Philly have, you know, changed things, the way we see things a little bit, I think they will try that as well over in San Diego.
I'm very intrigued to see how the effect, long-lasting impact that will have on the composition of squad profiles in the MLS, which is it's a completely another story for a different day. But I mean, to speak more about Tom himself, I mean, in fact, you said this to me the whole time about before being a leader, you must be a good follower.
Yeah.
And obviously you putting that into practice in spades at Orlando, from just spending again 3 days there last summer, could see the indelible impact of these budding interns coming into the club, the work they were doing. So Dave, tell me, I mean, how do you attract the right people into an organisation?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, you have to
$1 million one.
Yeah, $1 million. You have to transmit to the world that you're a purposeful organization. Now, what does that mean, purposeful organization? Think about Patagonia. As soon as they tell the world that they're going to use all of their funds to, you know, buy back mountain ranges, straight away people think purposeful, that's authentic. When you do something, your actions are credible, you're purposeful, right? So if you can tell, you know, the recruitment market that you are a purposeful organization, or your high performance department, you know, we're doing some great things together, people connect with you and say, hey, look, you know, I'm looking for something like this in my life at the moment. You know, this daily mission that you're always talking about, or this vision for your high performance staff, you know, I wouldn't mind getting involved in that. So people write to you all the time and say, hey, I want to come on a journey with you. Now, America's so big, right? So it's really, really difficult to attract talent. It's a huge market, but we get like lots of people connecting with us and saying, hey, look, if anything comes up, I'd be really interested in joining. And that's the great thing about building teams. There's only so many seats on the bus. If you can keep the people in your organization and retain them, and you can attract talent, right? And then there's a few guys who want to get off the bus. We call that leaving with love. If you can let them leave with love, and then maybe they can loop back, you know, then you can build a really great team. And you don't want to have too much churn. You don't have too many people coming and going. So, you know, it's retaining and attracting, and the war for talent, I call it. You know, that's all intentional, and you have to transmit that to the world to say, come and spend some time with us at Orlando and see if we can do something special together.
It sounds to me as though the game is sometimes unconsciously rigged the wrong way, in terms of, like, we look at the wrong time stratums. You know, in terms of, you know, we evaluate it cycle to cycle, as you must do in a business, of course, with so much money and expense on the line. But for me, there's a case there of, right, winning purposefully, winning deeply, winning throughout time.
Yeah. So winning deeply is that's an amazing concept. So, okay, the score will look after itself, right?
Okay, yeah.
But are all of your people thriving? When they're for the stinky fish exercise, when they're driving to work, are they happy and they're not even thinking about work? When they put their head on their pillow at nighttime and they're not even thinking about work, they're thinking about something, you know, that they elevated or supported, or someone they lifted at work, right? So if you are, you know, doing meaningful work and you're getting all your tasks done and it's rewarding, and you're not going home to your wife at the end of the day and saying, oh my God, I'm going to kick the cat here, I'm so stressed at work. If none of those things happen, right, then you are a purposeful organization, because your people are thriving, they're nourished. You know, we have burnout on one side and we have thriving on the other side. But going past thriving, you can flourish, right? That just means like you're in total flow state, and that's all because of the work you're doing. Now, if you win deep, right? If you win deep, you win more than the score, right? You're growing people. You're doing great work in the community. You know, you're engaged with everybody within your business and outside your business, and maybe you're making a social impact. You know, maybe you've got a side hustle that's, you know, helping something in the community. That's winning deep. You know, you know, all your people are benefiting from that. It sounds a bit like CSR or ESG, you know, but it's bigger than that, because if your people believe that you intentionally believe in them, they won't feel like it's corporate social responsibility thing. They'll think, oh my God, this really means something. We're going to win deep here, right? And at the end of the season, if we manage to, say, get to the conference final and we have a good season and we look at each other, we're all going to be able to say to each other in Orlando, like, wow, we had a really good go at this, you know. as a group, the band of brothers, we got together. There's a few moments in Copenhagen dressing rooms when we had the Champions League moments where the group really, really loved each other. And there was a depth to that, right? That's what you're always seeking when you're winning deep. Something a bit bigger than the score looking after itself.
And is that something that you've been seeking out throughout your entire career? Has it come in spades? Has it been fleeting?
Yeah, it comes in moments. It's just a moment when you stand back and you look at the group, and the group all is, going effortlessly in one direction. It's in flow state. You're like, wow, this is doing something. And then some great things happen. Maybe a young player like Duncan Maguire scores all these goals. That's for the organization. That's winning deep. Maybe the fan engagement goes through the roof, and the positive sentiment on Twitter changes, and there's a moment where everything shifts. That's winning deep. Kids are wearing their Orlando or Copenhagen jerseys, going to school. They're just so happy. That's winning deep. But then the social community bit, like, if you're doing something purposeful out in the community and you're changing people's lives, well, that's like really winning deep.
Well, it's not really your job, really, then, Dave. It's not really a director. It's that of an alchemist, really.
Yeah, but remember, I'm just one little small part of, this big machine. And when you step back and you try and make sense of it, there's so many, wicked parts that move. But when you try and make sense of it, you look for those moments. Because everybody always asks, what happened? What was the thing? Well, sometimes there isn't a thing, right? But when you sense make, you go back to the organizational structures, the brain trust, the Wilf family funding this. You look at Facundo Torres, getting, better. You look at the two central midfielders who screen everything, You look at all the things that just happen. Oscar Pereira, 450 games in the MLS. All those things that are happening, that's the moment amalgamated. So there's not just one moment. So you just step back and you try and make sense of it from the organization all the way down to the granular things. Like our nutritionist, this is her first year, she was an intern. She's come and done an amazing job, right? Working with our performance chef, who's come and changed the full culture of how we all break bread together. So two people have changed how we all get on with each other for maybe 4 hours a day. And that's amazing. So maybe that's the most important part of the season. Maybe that's it. But that's just one of the things that, make these magic moments happen.
Yeah. Something so small, but it speaks volumes about yourself that you're able to kind of identify that in the chaos and of the never-ending treadmill that is football. Because one of the things that's impressed me the most this week, you're speaking of sense making there, is obviously we're in the middle of an international break. Whole of bloody world football seems to be here at Soccerex, so it's fantastic for key executives to be at these keynote speeches. And even I was listening to Paul Barber the other day, CEO of Brighton, and he just gave an absolutely fantastic keynote speech with Mark Clement of GIS up in Fort Lauderdale. Hour and a half, 25 key principles behind Brighton's success. And it floored me, it astounded me, because it's just like, this guy is constantly on the treadmill, but he's just executing relentlessly. He's on to the next thing. But he spoke about how he would get together with his head of HR at Brighton at the end of every week, and a traffic light system they have, because now at Brighton, they don't have problems of scarcity, they have problems of abundance, because once you have people winning deeply and impacting within the organisation, Dave, you'll know this, they'll become long sought after. So they have the scorecard, the traffic light system, where they'll look at people within the organisation, who's at the highest risk of leaving now, who's the highest risk of being poached.
It's amazing. If you can integrate HR into your sports performance department, right? So if you can get your HR angle right, I talked a little bit about attracting the right talent or leaving with love. But if your HR is embedded in everything you do, your people will be happy. They'll feel like they're listened to. Now, when I worked in Fulham back in 2010, it was my first exposure to HR. It's not it's a bit vanilla HR, right? But it's not. It's so important. Mr. Fayad, he owned Harrods. So he integrated the HR principles of Harrods into Fulham Football Club. So interesting. I think I can still remember the 5 values that we had, right? We were confident custodians of the past, right? Johnny Hayes. We were pioneers, so you could take risks. We were action orientated, so you had to, action now. You're in the Premier League. You can't wait. You have to survive. Service excellence, coming from Harrods, so everything you had to do, you had to deliver it with service excellence. And we were open and inclusive. And I always remember the chef, the groundman, no matter who it was, they were as valued in the organization as the head coach or the star player. Now, I still remember those HR principles from 2010. It's an amazing journey, and Fulham were very successful because of, you know, HR. And then, you know, you talk about Paul Barber and Brighton and HR being embedded with what they do, you know, getting those little details right about people's, like, you know, interaction within your business. If you can get that right, you know, I think your people will stick around for a long time.
Yeah, and it's, again, it just goes back into playing that long-term game, but there's something, again, that comes throughout this podcast with you, and it's getting people in the right seats on the bus, because everyone's on the bus. Everyone's on the bus within your organisational framework. People hop off, people get on. But this concept of changing the seat, for me, so it's like, how do you identify hidden potential within your organisation and create structures for opportunity within that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because people want to move seats themselves. You know, people, you know, put their hands up and say, I want to be at the front of the bus, I want to be at the back of the bus. So you have to figure that out. Then what I do is that we do a strength assessment of all of our staff in the high performance. So we want to find out what you're good at. So are you actually facing the task that you're good at? So are you in love with it? And if you're in love with it, it becomes meaningful, right? So that means, no, I want to do something else. I want to expand into S&C. I'm a physio now, but I want to go into S&C. So then we build, you know, a pathway for the year, get qualifications, find a mentor, you know, take on tasks you love in S&C while still being a physio. So the competence stretches, right? The circle of competence stretches. And now what you're doing is you're building people who have got what we call dynamic capabilities. So people used to be an I shape, then they go to a T shape, and then they can go to an X shape. So they can move across all the different capabilities that you need in high performance. So an example would be a sports science guy that also does strength, that also knows nutrition, and then has gone and done some psychology, right? So now this person is generally very specialized with dynamic capabilities across all parts of the domain. Now, if you can get a person like that in the right seat, you've got a high performing team. You know, and if you imagine the F1 guys when they're all sitting around trying to do the 2 second wheel change. So if you have 4 guys who can do the wheel themselves, you know, that's an amazingly powerful high performance team you have. And then if you can get them in the right seats, it's really, really good. So as an organization, you have to be intentional about, you know, their careers. You have to support it with headcount, some experts, some budget for individual development plans. But then the person has to want to go on the journey themselves, right? And if they want to go on it and it's meaningful and they love the task that's in front of them, well, then it should run itself, shouldn't it?
I know. Look,
it sounds easy.
it does sound easy, and I catch your mind back there. Every time you say F1, Dave, I have to say you trigger me, because do you remember I was sat on the couch of your house there last year? You speak to me about that Drive to Survive show on Netflix. Yes. I told you I never watched it before. Coming here today, I've seen all 5 seasons. It's absolutely incredible show, but what strikes me there is this term of service excellence, and it's something that you alluded to in the previous podcast. And you know, you come here today and I mean, for me, you're so passionate about your craft. Like, I'm really, really hyped and energized learning from you, speaking to you each and every time. But I mean, what are you doing now to even enhance and iterate upon that now?
Yeah, so, you know, we live in the cycles now. So I'm in a cycle. And so, you know, I'm looking forward to getting to the finishing line. And then, you know, you reflect on what went right and what went wrong. And then there's a model that I use, like it's what it takes to win. So how we plan, how we play, who we are, and our identities. So I look back on all of those notes that I made for the year of, like, you know, how did we plan? How was my relationship with the head coach, with the GM, with the players? How was with all my line manager, all the people I line manage? So I check that. How do we play? I don't influence anything to do with how we play football, but I have to know how we're playing, because that helps us prepare the team physically, you know, and we have to meet peak game demands. It's a really, really hard league, you know, to go for 97 minutes. So I have to understand all of that context. So I look back with the help of experts to go through all of the data for the year to see, like, were we ready at the right time? And then I'll just love reviewing identity work. Like, is our team, does it smell like the manager's team? That's so important, and making sure we can support the players to understand what the manager's team and identity should be. So I review all of that. So I love sense making. So I love looking back to see if what we had prepared for the year coming is actually working. So I do that, and that's very rewarding. Now, then how do I switch off? Because my young family, I take them back to Denmark, and we become a little Danish family again, and that's beautiful, and we get to see all of our families that we don't see a lot of. So I use that time to reflect, switch off, try and get in nature. And then, I always try and plan something with Craig White, who is my kind of spiritual guru mentor.
David Clancy speaks so highly.
And so Craig White, if I can get something in the diary for the next year, then I know myself I'm going to grow emotionally or spiritually. I'm going to become a little bit more mindful and start feeling again, because I'm very action orientated. So I do a lot of logical work, and I'm in my head for most of the time. And that's not the best place to be as a man. You need to feel a bit more. So then I have to role model that myself. I have to go deep inside myself and try and figure out what it is to feel and to switch off. Those concepts around burnout are real, but you have to give yourself time. And so I use the off season to try and do some deep work on myself, but get something in the diary for 2024, so it's there. So I have to do it. And there's a chance we might be going up a big hill in Peru in April. It's called the King's Retreat. So you basically walk up the Inca Trail.
Wow.
With 15 other men, with Craig White and his team. It's an unbelievable experience. So that's where I will try and grow next year.
You'll have to tell me more about that.
I'll tell you after it.
Okay. But in all our conversations too, and it's something you alluded to there now, self-reflection, it's a key part of the role. And you spoke to me before about this. It's not only what you're learning, but it's what you're unlearning. And obviously, since we last spoke, there's been a lot that's happened. Could you take us through what's been probably the biggest thing you've unlearned in the past 12 months, Dave?
Yeah, so unlearning is a really important concept, because you have to check if what you thought was right, and then you have to frame it against the environment that you're in. So your environment and society that you're in determines everything really about the quality of the relationships within your life or your work, and then the quality of the relationship with yourself inside your own head. Right, so having to unlearn certain things is really important in the environment you're in. Now, I'm a European in America, right? So I have to unlearn, this is the European way to do something around here. Now, but we're not really in America. We're in Latin amalgamation of, Miami and Florida, Orlando. So things are different because there's such a Latin context on everything. I have to unlearn how I view everything, because the Latin staff and the Latin coaches and Latin players, they've had a different formative experience than I have. And what I might think are UEFA level standards, they might think, well, this isn't how we do it in Rosario in Argentina or up a mountain in Mendoza. So I have to go to the other side to try and understand how they see things. And now, medicine should be black and white. Injuries should be black and white, but they're not. So I have to spend time understanding that otherness. So I have to unlearn this is the UEFA way to do a thing. And I spent a year sharpening my saw. But my first year, I just spent most of my time trying to figure out, what is the otherness of what I'm experiencing. It's really rewarding to view it through somebody else's lens, not your own.
Yeah, and probably there's no better or more favourable culture than, I would say, the Latin one, that has such indelible impacts that you can actually go deep into. And I would say, again, speaking to Yanni about this, we mistake perception for vision the whole time, but perception is so much more when it comes down to sense making. I just find these little nuances. I spoke with Guillaume Balguet, in fact he was in this chair yesterday, the night before bloody Argentina played Mexico in the night of the World Cup. It's a make or break game, and it's not exactly ideal prep, but it was, what it was, Lionel Messi speaking, having mate for 6 hours with Rodrigo de Paul. Again, you just because you can't measure the benefit of something, doesn't mean it's intangible or unrewardable.
No, and in Latin culture, it's so important to just sit there and break bread together and have mate and have your friends around. And we're doing this groundbreaking thing with Orico, which is the biomarker testing where we check the players' bloods for recovery. Now, Orico embedded themselves with Uruguay at the World Cup. And they gave us some insights on, what the stress of a World Cup is on the player's body. But the one thing I took away from it was the Suarez effect on the Uruguay national team. He basically just kept everything going within that group. And the Cavani's there. There's big players within that group. But my friend who was there, embedded with them, he just said, look, these guys they just love each other. You know, they just love him. They just love having him around. They just sit around for 5-6 hours, have a mate and having a chat. Now, in Europe, the sports scientists will probably come in and say, you have to go to your bed. Yeah, stop having that mate. Yeah, drink that water. You know, we're gonna close this room. But in Latin cultures, it's completely different. The sports scientist is probably sitting there with them having a mate.
It's crazy. And you know what? Before we wrap up, I have to say, like, for anyone listening, anyone watching as well, you'll see from Dave, like, you're certainly a personality that's larger than life. And I would say football is all the better for having more people like you in it. And I've never asked you this before, but I'm just curious because you've been embedded in the game for so long at various levels. What brings you joy from the game itself?
Yeah, you know, Dave Brailsford used to say when they won a race, he'd be so relieved because he didn't lose the race, right? So I often think about it myself, like, what is it about every fixture or being in every dressing room, or what is it? And, you know, I go around and give everybody a big handshake after a game, and I'm just like, the way you've committed yourself to this, and the way you've like gone as a warrior through the wall for this group in every dressing room that I've ever been in, the fact that you've been able to do this is so rewarding, and it's almost their sacrifice, those 11 players or 15 players, whoever play. You know, for me, I'm like, wow, that was an amazing experience to watch this athlete do that. Then I step back and I watch all the staff and all the sacrifices they've done, and all, like, people not seeing their families so much, and you look back at them on their journeys and you're so proud that they're experiencing this as well. You go and look in the coach's eyes and he's still locked in to, you know, and then he has to go and give a press conference about something, give him a big handshake and say, look, that was amazing, congratulations on another victory, you know, because it's so hard to win. I remember Breda Hangelin told me in Fulham, we beat Spurs 1-0 in White Hart Lane, and I was like, wow, and he was like, wow, to win a game in White Hart Lane 1-0, and you could just see how much it meant to him. I was like, oh my God, brother, this is amazing. You're so proud of this victory. Yeah. And some people call it three-point lane because it can be easy to win there. But that moment, I realized that athletes, you know, every victory, everything means so much to them. So just to share that journey with them, that's what actually motivates me. Just to be a passenger on their journey, it's unbelievable for me. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Creating positive emotion for others.
Yeah,
that's simple. It's amazing, and I think it speaks volumes to you as a person. But again, for anyone that's watching or listening, we are joined by an audience here as well. So I'm just going to cast the microphone aside and hear any questions from anyone here in the room about anything Dave has raised.
Look, I had about 7 that I wrote down, and no more than 30 seconds later you start answering them with sub-answers, with tools. Not many people share tools, so phenomenal, Dave. To touch on another tool that I think, like, I'd love to hear more on is, you spoke about sense making, which is a quality of your perception. Right? You talk about harmony and how you're diffusing tension. So can you share a tool you've recently acquired or recently sharpened to sense make?
Yeah, so mental models can be really helpful for everybody. If you can find things that work for you, it can, like, you can then find parts of a story that make sense to you, and then you can view it through an organizational lens, or through a group lens, or through, you know, a unit lens, or through your lens or somebody else's lens, right? So you have to figure out which all the actors are in this mental model, right? Some things that happen in there are going to be logic, things that make sense in your head. Some parts of it are going to be about your heart, you know, the feeling of it, right? So you can write those things. What really happened? What just happened here? That was extremely logic. No, that was emotional and chaos. So you can write down those things about what happened. And then what you try and do in the center is, you're like, what are the things that we agreed on? What are the hard facts that we agreed on? How are we going to show up? What are our standards? You know, are we capable, and who's going to bring it? Do we have enough capacity? What do the organizational structures do? You know, what's the story we told ourselves about today, or the game we're going to go into? For a coach who might be listening, what were the principles that we said we were going to follow in the game, or what was the phase we were going to try and open up or overload the opponent? All those different things you put down the center. And when you sense make, right, the logic and the heart, you know, you have to figure out what happened here. And that model can be really, really interesting, because you want to go back and check, you know, was this luck, or did we intentionally do some things that we described in the center, And then the emotion got us over the line, or the logic got us over the line, right? And then what you should be doing then is you iterate every time. What worked, And you want to remove luck as you get closer to the end. And in what it takes to win is that you will become, focus on what matters most. So as you get to the finish line, as you get to like conference finals and MLS finals, there shouldn't be any luck anymore. You're definitely going to need a bit of emotion, and you hope you're going to be a bit logical. And when you sense make, you can traffic light yourself and say, yeah, that worked. That was at the standard we needed. And we got a bit too emotional there, but we needed the emotion to get the group focused. And we did everything we agreed on, right? So if you can do that as a sense-making tool, then you'll know that you've reduced luck in the equation, because there's still a lot of luck.
It's pretty class. Pretty good.
I got a question. The stinky fish model.
Yeah.
How do you identify an individual growth moment versus a cultural change from a sticky point that someone mentions?
So you have to get everybody to describe, how they feel. So it's, they own it. And we give them some stories, and one of them is a famous one, which is like, what do you tell your wife when you go home? Right? If they can trust you and they can tell you what they tell their wife when they go home, that's a huge moment. Now it's a safe organization. So now they have a feeling that they can grow past that. Now, if that sticking point is always there and it just can't go away, that might be because of a formative period in their life, or it might be because of like a relationship at work that isn't at the level that they need. That person usually has to do the work themselves. Now, what we do is we actually supply them with executive coaches or online experts or emotional intelligent experts. So if someone gets bogged down in something in their stinky fish, then we give them the tools to basically go and do, we call it doing the work, go and do the work. When they've done the work, that can become a moment of growth. Yeah? And if they have that moment of growth, then hopefully we say, you've parked your car, right? As long as you've parked your car and you come into work, you shouldn't bring it with you. The baggage doesn't belong to work. The baggage is in your car. So we're there to support people on that journey too.
Simple, actionable, concise. I think there's so much gold to be mined from this podcast for anyone listening back and really, really attentive to the finer details. But for me, as you know, Dave, I have the height of respect for you. And this has only been a second iteration. I hope there's many more to come on the show. But for all those listening now, as you know yourself, has this closing tradition on the Load On podcast, I'm going to switch the question a small bit. For those slightly bit inspired by your journey today at Even, and want to know a little bit more about yourself and want to replicate what you've done as a key cultural architect, what would be the one bit of gold you'd leave them from this podcast? So
let's say it again. You've got to do the work, right? You have to know yourself before you know your team, right? So if you do the work on yourself and you tune into your own emotional intelligence and who you're going to be under pressure as a leader, who you are at work and who you are at home, who you are when the lights go off, are you still authentic to yourself? If you're values led, if you do the work, know yourself, know your team, then you can grow your team. And if you're going on a leadership journey, you have to get people to follow you, because you're always a follower yourself. So I'm following other people, but my team have to be willingly following me, and for that they have to see me as being credible. So if you do the work yourself and you understand who you are, then I think it's a great bit of an insight to go on that journey. And obviously Craig White is the man who looked inside my soul with me, and that helped me back in 2017 go on this journey. So I would highly recommend that if you're interested in this type of stuff, you check out Craig White.
I'll have to attach that in the show notes below. But David Cosgrave, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully we can complete the hat trick. Who knows, maybe back in Knocknacara sometime.
Yeah, thanks for the welcome.